Did Shanks and Shamrock switch places while they were up in the Holy Land together? And has even the little stuff that we thought we knew about the red-haired Yonko been a complete lie up to this point? That's what I aim to solve with you today, because a big theory has been floating around recently in the One Piece community, and it's time for me to lay the hammer down like Loki does with Ragnar. So let's see if this theory does hold up, what supports it, what evidence might debunk it, and if that were the case, maybe there's actually a completely different angle we can look from to uncover the truth behind these two brothers, because I gotta be honest, there is something weird going on here. And so I'm just gonna try my best to do you justice and point out the evidence that speaks for the theory first, starting with what the main theory is and the other variations that I've been seeing floating around in a lot of different places. And then I'll cover the evidence that speaks against it, but I think as I did that, I might have uncovered another theory that works even better that you might get a kick out of. Now, the basic idea of this theory is that Shanks and Shamrock actually switched places when Shanks went up to the Holy Land for at the very least a year, which we actually now know is for sure only a year based on the timeline of his entire life. And man, I actually still can't get over how easy it was for him to do that. Like, Doflamingo wanted nothing more than to be a celestial dragon again, and look where that got him in the end. Anyways, that's pretty much the main idea here, right? People are now theorizing that the Shanks that we've always known was actually Shamrock the entire time, and that Shamrock switched up with Shanks after receiving a scar fighting Blackbeard. Which, like, I can actually wrap my head around, because if I were Shamrock too, I'd not want to give up my hot vibes and reputation, right? Pretty boy over here probably has this flawless persona, and it's easier to keep up the facade of perfect Shamrock if he switches places with Shanks once he's actually scarred. Also, it'd honestly just be very funny if Shamrock just begged Shanks to trade places so that his popularity was capped or something. Now, the other part of this that people have been commenting on is that this might mean that Shanks himself is actually a bad guy, and that somehow, despite his upbringing, Shamrock was the good brother all along, which, yes, I guess is a take for sure. I'm not so sure about that one, seeing how he was raised committing the most heinous crimes imaginable, but maybe that's why. He was sick of being so evil, so he became the strongest pirate in the world instead. And even though, as you can tell, I don't love this piece of evidence, I've actually seen that theory floated around in the Japanese theory space for quite a while as well. Basically, ever since Shamrock was confirmed. And I will say that this does address one big problem I've been wondering about with all this, because do you ever stop and ask yourself, how did everyone know which kid was which? I don't know, I just sort of saw something on X, the Everything app. Sucks. And it made me go, yeah, I mean, how does Roger actually know that this little baby was named Shanks? But I don't know, maybe there were name tags in his pajamas, or it was just random luck on who got named what based on their, I don't know, clothing tags or something. But maybe it really is arbitrary, since the boys may have switched spots during their young adulthood. Now, trust me, if this is a theory that you really like or you think is actually happening, I totally understand it. Believe me, I think it's a very cool hypothetical idea. Like, I'd love for there to be a way that this could actually work out. The old Shanks and Shammy switcheroo, like, you know, the Parent Trap would be absolutely awesome. Arguably, it'd be my favorite movie. So, what is the actual evidence that we can get for this theory? Because if I'm gonna do this theory justice, I think we need to address all the valid points that made me and other theorists like my man Roger Space go, those are some odd details to throw into the story. The biggest one of these, I think, comes from chapter 1167, where we see the two brothers walking through the Holy Land together. And well, actually, it starts even slightly before that, now that I think about it, because when Harold is getting his Shallow Covenant, the official term for the cool little cross tattoo all the devoted Blades of God have, we do see who appears to be a younger Shanks present here. But it's kind of weird, because later, after some time has clearly passed, Garling then introduces Shanks to Harold, confirming that at the beginning of the chapter, it's Shamrock present while Harold becomes a devoted Blade of God instead. Also, man, I'll never get over that title. Like, it's just so much cooler than Holy Knight. I want to become a devoted Blade of God now, not for all the weird racial blah blah blah, so just, you know, so that I can put it on my business card. Blade of God. Or at conventions and events, I can wear one of all those, "Hello, my name is Manu" tags that says, "Manu, devoted blade of God." That'd be something else. Anyhow, sorry. I wanted to point out the young Shamrock moment because the real evidence that people are using comes from later in this chapter when we see the two brothers together. Shanks, in full Holy Knight attire, has the same short hair as the young Shamrock and has a very specific part of his outfit that stood out like a sore thumb, I think. Because here, he's got that frilly ascot and he's buttoned up very official-like. Which, curiously, is exactly how the modern-day Shamrock dresses too. Because when we first see Shamrock land on Elbaf for the first time, or teleport into Elbaf for the first time, he's in the exact style and outfit that Shanks is wearing during this flashback, as opposed to the open-chested, bare-skinned, no frilly ascot Shamrock that he apparently has during this very moment. Which, as you know, is of course exactly how Shanks dresses all the freaking time. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it is a very awkward, weird detail to include from Oda-sensei. Like, why do that with their outfits? Well, the theory is that Oda's doing this to show us, they switched places. We're now actually seeing Shamrock, the one with the short hair, as a scarred knight dressed up very formally. That's why he then insults Harold the way that he does, since it is what he would just normally do still. Meanwhile, Shanks has now switched with him and has the longer hair and a little bit of a wilder outfit. Because, of course, he's never ever dressed this formally in his entire pirate life. He's a guy that likes to party. And eventually the idea would be that Shamrock goes down to the ocean, which I just, cannot comprehend at all, man. Like, apparently it would be so that he could experience the lower seas and see how wrong his upbringing was, and Shanks ended up staying, which also makes no sense unless for some reason Roger raised him so wrong, or he has some secret mission up there. And I guess the other big part of the evidence for this idea is that Shanks in the main series just randomly pops around the world, right? Like, the dude seems to have some broken fast-traveling powers because he makes his way from the seas around Wano, battling Kaido, to Marineford in no time at all. But then again, if he was a Holy Knight already and was able to tap into the Abyss powers, then maybe that's how that was all pulled off to begin with. The original Shamrock, who's now leading the Red Hair Pirates, is able to take them through the Abyss to make it to Marineford on time, or end up in all those very different spots at random times as well. I'd even say that it would work for explaining how the Nika fruit was stolen, since Shamrock would very easily be able to shake off who's who if he could just teleport away. Also, Mihawk is just a super interesting part in this as well, if you ask me. Oh, what's that you say? You didn't actually ask me? Well, tough luck, this is my video, and I'm gonna point it out anyways. I'm dunking on you the way that Luffy does in these fun NBA promos he recently has. Speaking of which, if you didn't know this was a thing, why not check out my Patreon for the Opinion Piece, a weekly One Piece newsletter I actually put out there for free. Every single week I cover all the highlight news about anything One Piece there, and there's also some other very sick content behind a very cheap paywall if you're interested in getting some more Ohara content, videos, reviews, art assets we have in these videos, stuff like that. Little plug over, back to the video, and back to Mihawk, because wouldn't it be hilarious if the reason that Mihawk doesn't want to fight Shanks anymore isn't because he lost his arm, but because now it's Shamrock instead, and he knows about that. Kinda like going, nah, I'm good, you ain't built like your brother, bro, you know, those vibes. Or the opposite, Shanks and Mihawk were even, but Shamrock is just next level. And I do want to point out a little extra thing here, which is the statements from Oda about how once the final saga starts, we'll really start seeing Shanks appear in the manga too. This is actually from an interview all the way back during 1998, which that is very upsetting to my stomach because I was crawling around at that point. And also reminds me that I'm just way older than I wish I was at this point. Ugh. Okay, anyhow, yes. Well, back then, Oda stated that when Shanks appears frequently in the manga, you can assume that One Piece has entered the final saga. Which then, of course, would just be this insane Goda-level mega foreshadowing thing for the fact that Shamrock doesn't appear until the final saga, but if this theory is actually true, Shamrock and Shanks have now switched spots, which actually means that Shanks is appearing frequently in the final saga because we're now finally seeing adult Shanks for the first time through Shamrock, who isn't actually Shamrock, but Shanks. Which honestly wouldn't even be a big plot hole because we do see young Shanks very infrequently, so it's not that we haven't seen the real Shanks at all, it just means that the dude that we all thought was Big Daddy Shanks wasn't. It was his brother. And the big payoff, or the crazy reveal at the end of all this, would be that despite what we've been thinking, Shanks is actually not who we thought. He was Shamrock, a former Holy Knight the entire time. Meanwhile, the Shamrock that we see invading Elbaf and try to recruit Loki was actually the OG Shanks that sailed with the Raja pirates. And there are some other points that you could also make for this theory too, like the fact that the Giants really like Shanks, which could be explained with the entire Herald Shamrock-Shanks relationship now. It could also be the case that, you know, maybe Shamrock and Shanks are actually planning something. Maybe it's that both are actually evil, and you know now Shanks has infiltrated the pirate world and is controlling things from there, which could of course explain why the government is letting him do so many things. It might also explain why Shanks might actually be the one who was up there talking to the Gorosei, or in this case, I guess it would be Shamrock. So it could be like this triple or quadruple, like 4D chess move that Oda is pulling on us, where this character is Shanks, only that it's actually Shamrock pretending to be Shanks. You get what I mean? Like, if both of them were in cahoots here, it could mean that that's why the pirate of the two brothers could actually just go freely within and out of Morijaw whenever he wanted. Or the opposite could be true as well, where potentially, Shanks goes up there, tells his brother about everything that's going on, maybe tells him a little bit about what happened during God Valley, or what he found out about the true history and Emu, and actually manages to somehow convince Shamrock that what he's doing is wrong, gets Shamrock on his side, and now the plan is just, okay, well, we both have different experiences, you down as a pirate, me here as a Holy Knight, so why don't we trade places and we try to learn more in our respective worlds by kind of applying our previous knowledge, Shanks that way being able to rummage through Morijaw and finding out a lot of stuff, and Shamrock maybe being down there on the ocean, kind of applying his Holy Knight knowledge and orchestrating like more of the things like the Kaido War and whatnot, and the government kind of has to okay it because, they think that both of them are still Holy Knights. Or maybe the government doesn't know about it, the Gorosei don't know about it, and they have tricked literally everyone with maybe the exception of Garling. I guess you could even make the argument that if it was Shamrock who knew everything about the Nika fruit and was actually him who ambushed the marine ship or who was transporting the Nika fruit, that could actually make sense too, because he would actually know a lot more about the truth of this fruit, being close to the Gorosei, being like in the top hierarchy of the entire world government. Maybe he knew about the Nika fruit, maybe he heard in the Holy Land, oh, we found it, we're gonna transport it from here to here, I'm gonna have a window to actually snatch it. And maybe it being Shamrock instead of Shanks would explain that a lot easier than Shanks somehow finding out about it. So yeah, there are a bunch of points that could actually speak for this being the case. And in the end, everyone got switched up, like that little cup game where they play at carnivals, right, with the balls, which I always lose, by the way. I don't have good enough observation hockey, I guess. Unless I got nothing, man. And honestly, neither does this theory, I think, because I really wanted to find more evidence for it working, but this is pretty much all I could muster up, really. Which is a shame because, again, I really wanted this to be true. I like this theory. Like Shanks being up there, maybe on Roger's orders, or maybe doing his own little planning thing and convincing Shamrock to be on his side and switching places, and now it's actually Shamrock who has all the Celestial Dragon heritage, who's looking after Luffy for Shanks, maybe? Or would it then have been Shamrock actually who gave Luffy the Straw Hat, which would bring its own complication with it as well, and would maybe make a Shanks-Luffy confrontation so much weirder, because Shanks might be, who are you? I've never met you. And Luffy's like, Shanks, it's you, right? And Shanks is like, yeah, it's me. And Luffy's like, you gave me that hat. And he's like, no, I gave that hat to Shamrock. I don't know how you got that hat. Could be pretty cool. Again, I think having weird switcheroos and this person wasn't who we thought all along is very fun in the story to happen and cool storytelling. But with that being said, now let's get right into the counterpoints, because boy, sadly, do we have a lot here. Because when you actually line up the evidence that Oda gives us, this theory starts to kind of collapse faster than Luffy did when Ace became a donut. And I'm not gonna pull any punches here because I can already see what's gonna happen. The anime is gonna massively debunk this theory in about a year and a half with the new release schedule, right? Because in case you missed it, which, I sure couldn't because they literally plastered posters spoiling this all over Japan, including train stations, Shanks and Shamrock have different voice actors. Shamrock is voiced by the GOAT Kenjiro Tsuda, one of my favorite. Okay, my favorite voice actor. Who am I kidding, right? He has this very famous, deep, much more gruffy voice, which makes sense since that's the same voice actor as Nanami, Seto Kaiba, Kishibe, and Overhaul. God, those Shamrock scenes are just gonna break the internet when they're animated. This guy has like the most magical voice. So cool. Anyways, there is just no escaping it, right? We have heard Shanks' adult voice with a scar, and I hate to be that guy, but we also have Shanks' adult voice without a scar. His VI actually appears in a small pre-scar flashback from his young adult life. And if the character standing in the Holy Land with the scar speaks with that same voice, congrats! This theory is over. Done. Finished. Editor, throw the donut meme back on screen for me, will you? Thank you. And honestly, this isn't even a small detail either, because if Shamrock were actually doubling as Shanks, then Oda would have known this entire time himself. He would have had to make sure that the voice actor switch happened when we saw the unscarred Shanks in the anime speak during things like Film Red or during some flashbacks. But I can also see the counterpoint here, which would then kind of be that Toei would never have known this and might retroactively make that switch later on. And hey, I've got way harsher points down the line, so let's just let this one slide for now and move on. Because the next big issue I have with this is Shanks' facial scar. You know, the little cat scratch that he got from Blackbeard. Shanks himself says that Teach is the one who gave it to him, which means that for all of this to actually work, Blackbeard would have needed to injure Shamrock before Shanks went up to the Holy Lands. Because then Shanks would take Shamrock's spot, and Shamrock is the scarred one. The dude would not have been strong enough or crazy enough to injure a tier 2 regenerating Shamrock permanently, but the even bigger issue, in my opinion, is that when you really look at him, especially after God Valley, it's so clear that Teach looks just like his daddy, Davy D. Zebek, and let's be honest, no Holy Knight is letting that man walk away alive once they interact with him, right? He's a member of the Davy clan that Imu once erased above all else, so to me it's pretty blatantly clear, I think, that if the Shanks in the Holy Land has the Teach scar, then that's just Shanks. Full stop. Oh, but Manu, no, it's not working, man. And I'll really show you why once and for all, because there's no cutting corners here. Adult Shanks busts out Roger's divine departure, a technique explicitly learned by being on Roger's ship. And you know who wasn't raised on Roger's ship? Shamrock. That little altar boy was a homegrown celestial dragon child. My man here wasn't out swabbing decks, topping off Rayleigh's drinks, and getting the birds and the bees talk from Scopper, because let's face it, if Shanks is learning sex ed, it's from the resident dongslinger of the crew, Scopper Gaban. Though, I guess it could also be Rayleigh. There's a lot, it could be Roger, dude. There's a lot of them on the Roger. The Roger crew is weirdly sexually active. Anyways, there is a near zero chance that Shamrock has access to Roger's signature move unless Roger taught it to him. I mean, Oda literally pointed this out in an SBS, how insanely impressive it already is that Shanks can use it himself, and you're telling me now that he's somehow also able to teach it to Shamrock, and Shamrock is choosing to use it instead of all the crazy stuff he's learned since birth? There's also a whole different point we could make about Buggy and his interactions he has with adult Shanks, which I'm not sure you could theoretically fake that, but even that kind of adds into that. Like during Marineford, does that make sense if it's Shamrock? I don't think so. And I mentioned him already, but there's another way bigger hole in all of this, and his name is Scopper. I'm filling the holes, Gaban. Because when Shanks meets Scopper on Elbaf, Scopper treats him exactly as someone whose hockey signature he's very familiar with. In case you haven't realized this yet, One Piece has repeatedly now shown recently that high-level hockey users have a very identifiable feel to them, like a fingerprint or footprint. Luffy, for example, instantly recognizes Chopper on Elbaf because of that intuitive hockey signature detection. And while Scopper doesn't seem to be operating at that exact observation level, he's still the Scopper Gaban, a top tier in the entire One Piece universe. And the man who sailed and mentored Shanks for many years, over a decade. There's no universe where he meets Shamrock, senses nothing familiar, and just shrugs it like, yeah, that's definitely my little guy, guess he changed a little bit. Nah, like, Shamrock's not gonna pass the vibe check, unless Scopper's in on it too, but then, like, what is this, like, One Piece wide conspiracy? But somehow, if all that wasn't enough yet, I'll just literally show you that this theory is deconfirmed by chapter 1167 that kind of gave birth to it. Oda gives us a beautifully simple, ruthless, effective piece of visual confirmation. the Covenant tattoos. Drumroll please. In chapter 1167, Garling states that Shamrock was already a tier 2 deep sea covenant bearer long before Shanks ever had his tier 1 shallow covenant mark to begin with. And we know that the tier 1 is the mark that scarred Shanks had during his meeting with Scopper on Elbaf in the bathtub. Plain and simple, knowing that there is a tier 1 tattoo on the arm of Shanks in that scene confirms it was not Shamrock. No swap. No little twisteroo here, just the same red-haired pirate, pre-Emperor, carrying the same early tier mark that he got a year ago at this point up in the Holy Lands. And it's just that, in reality, as unfortunate as it is, I think, there's just a mountain of evidence I've been able to find against this theory, and so I think it's time to really put it to rest. However, don't worry, because as I said earlier, there is something I did think about after this that I really think you should stick around for, because it works with all these points, just the conclusion is a different one. But before we get to that, just to point it out again, the biggest thing that makes me think that this is not the case is that we are now in the final saga, and well, yes, there are plenty more years of One Piece left, hopefully, right? It just feels a little bit icky, like odd at the very least. Like, why in the series' 11th hour would Oda rug pull us with this truly monumental reveal? And yet, somehow it's not monumental because it really wouldn't change anything about the story. We just would have been calling this guy the wrong name, and we just sort of need to ignore his childhood. Like, it's a cool idea. Again, I like the idea, and sure, it could be the case technically still, but it really just doesn't seem like something Oda would be doing this late in the game. And again, the payoff just would be that, oh, well, I guess it's not Shanks, it's Shamrock, but he still did all the things that we thought Shanks did. Also, come on, are we just assuming that Shanks is evil based on this chapter because we are taking his words at face value, even though I think it's painfully obvious that he's just lying through his teeth and saying what he thinks a celestial dragon would be saying at this point. So that he could actually gather some information from the Holy Land, and he even freed freaking Fisher Tiger. Oda immediately showed us, nah, he's not bad. He's not bad. He freed this guy who then freed the other slaves. So to me at least, it's a much more satisfying and so much cooler to see that Roger's adopted son was this mega next level planner who played everyone like fools. Sneaking into the Holy Land, getting the info that he needed, making a swift exit, and then becoming a Yonko. And not that he just switched sides suddenly and his brother was actually the solid dude instead the entire time. So yeah, when you really stack it all together, I'm gonna keep it real with you, this ain't it, Chief. Shanks is Shanks, Shamrock is Shamrock, but in fact, I do very much think that there is something sneaky happening here, contrary to the vibes that I've been actually giving off this video. Because I actually do think that Shanks and Shamrock are really in cahoots here. I think it's likely that they're working together in some capacity, because honestly, they're just bros, right? Shamrock seems like a pretty reasonable dude in pretty much every single interaction we see of him, and I would argue that he's yet to do anything truly cruel and ruthless. Like, the man really should have killed Loki after the recruitment effort fell through, but he didn't. That is giga sus to me after everything we've seen about Garling and all the other Holy Knights. It kind of seems like a move he'd make if Shanks and he were in agreement that Loki was very important to Luffy's story and, fulfilling his goal. And if they really are working together, a lot of the evidence for this theory I think still works, but the evidence against it doesn't contradict it. Shamrock could still help Shanks get around using the Abyss, like maybe Shamrock was just the one fighting Kaido and the Marines just didn't know he existed. It seems likely as many go up to the Holy Land, and we've also seen that Oda loves using some visual stand-ins to just, avoid weird plot spoilers. He does that a lot, like on God Valley. Nobody knows it was Emu except for Zebek, since they all just thought it was Saturn. So this could just be the same scenario. People see a red-haired hockey beast fighting Kaido and they just assume it's Shanks. But it's actually just his brother being a homie so that Shanks can actually make it to Marineford on time. The outfit debacle, well, it's pretty simple. Shamrock probably is just wearing his frilly little ascot because he's the captain of the Holy Knights now. He's probably got to be a little bit more formal after being promoted, and it does explain why Shanks did wear it, since he was trying to suck up to his dad and, get in the good graces with everyone. And heck, for all that I know and care, Blackbeard might just be in on this as well. I mean, the idea that Shanks was fighting Blackbeard trying to prove his loyalty to the Holy Land by slaying the last member of the Davy clan, and that's what allowed him to go back up to Marijua, does make a lot of sense. A very Blackbeard thing to do, actually. It would explain how he actually managed to get in there, at least better than anything else that I can come up with right now. Plus, it lines up with the fact that Shanks and Shamrock were both born on God Valley, and they could possibly even be members of the Davy clan themselves. Big Cousin T over here was just helping out, and all I'm really saying is that I do think Oda's building up to some crazy Shamrock Shanks reveal, but I don't think it's what this theory was aiming for. Oda seems to actually be leading us towards a very dynamic duo situation where both brothers unite and defeat the Holy Knights while Luffy goes on to battle Emu during the final saga. That would be something else, right? But what is it that they're actually trying to stop, right? And honestly, what's going on with the symbols used for all these contracts? Well, I do think I have a good idea for what that might be, because looking at the evil plus sign of the devil that Emu's been tossing out, I found something that looks oddly very similar, and I think it might explain Emu's entire plan. So if you want to know the truth about that, you should check out this video right here. I promise it's fun. And otherwise, Shanks so much for watching. Shanks to all of our Patreons, and I will see you in the next video.